Hello, and welcome again to another episode of Five Plain Questions, a podcast that proposes 5 questions to Indigenous artists, creators, musicians, writers, movers and shakers, and culture bearers, people in the community that are doing great things for their communities. I'm Joe Williams, your host for this conversation. My goal is to showcase these amazing people in our Indigenous communities from around the region and country. We return to our multi-part series in conjunction with Art of the Rural, an arts nonprofit based out of Winona, Minnesota. We're so excited to promote their work that they're doing, engaging in community with art and intention. I want to introduce you to Tina Tavera. Marina Cristina Tavera, or Tina, is a Minneapolis-based Latinx artist, curator, and cultural agitator, influenced by her transnational upbringing between Minnesota and Mexico. Her art investigates the constructions of racial, ethnic, and gender national and cultural identity via numerous mediums, including printmaking, installation, and public art. The focus is on Latinidad within the United States. She has exhibited nationally and internationally and has received fellowships and grants: the McKnight Visual Arts Fellowship Grant, the Smithsonian Latino Museum Studies Program, Museum of Modern Art in New York, and many, many more. Her artwork can be found in the collections of the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, National Museum of Mexican Art, the Weizmann Art Museum, and again, many, many more. She is all over the world. Her work is incredible. Her writings as well have been published by the Walker Art Center, the Minneapolis Institute of the Arts, the College Art Association, as well as a book titled Mexican Pop Art. So, with that said, let's jump into 5 more questions with Tina Tavera. Tina Tavera, welcome back to your 5 Plain Questions. It's really great to see you again.
Thank you, Joe. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, yep, absolutely. You were on a few seasons ago, and we connected about your work and about your story, and I want to revisit it with our new listeners and kind of go a little deeper into your career, your artwork, than we were before. So, would you be able to reintroduce yourself for our audience, please?
Sure. Well, I'm actually Maria Cristina Tavera, my full name. Everyone refers to me as Tina, and I have grown up in Minnesota, and my whole life, I've left for short periods of time, but always return. And I actually am an artist in the Twin Cities area, Minneapolis, and I work at Augsburg University.
Okay, okay. Uh, yeah, you have to forgive me. I'm a South Dakota boy. My pronunciations are as basic as best as someone from South Dakota. I will note though, you say Minnesota like a Minnesotan,
I
which
do.
is
I do.
fantastic.
I do. Yeah. When I was young, I actually grew up speaking Spanish, and I had a speech therapist. Probably because I had an accent, so I make jokes that this was hard to come by, this thick Minnesota accent.
How do you yeah, how do you work with a Spanish accent and a Norwegian accent all together?
Well, it's interesting you say that, Joe, because I actually feel that a lot of my artwork actually thinks about those things and who you are, right? With those two, that split, that I think that divisive sort of, but at the same time, you're the one person. It's interesting.
No, that's an interesting comment and take on our work. Is so much of the work in our community, our indigenous community, is sort of a balance between our traditional ways and our the contemporary world that we live in and our
Mhm.
place in that.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah, and I think we're always trying to navigate that, right? Even in our values and our day-to-day activities.
That said, how have your experiences and perspectives affected your work, and how's that evolved over the course of your career?
I think growing up wondering what it would be like if I would have grown up in Mexico, and then being so close to my relatives that are so far away, I think I overthink almost, what it means to be who I am in Minnesota. And, I think it was a lot stronger when my children were born because then I really wanted them to understand the cultural norms even though we are so far away, and so it has, affected my artwork, and then I have worked with TRIO programs, for almost 3 decades now, helping low-income first-generation students reach their academic goals. So I think it really becomes a big part of who I am on a day-to-day basis.
Hmm. This kind of flows into the next question about if there was any specific milestone that influenced uh, certain moments of growth within your career. It sounds like motherhood was one of those things.
Yeah, I started with, domestic issues, just thinking about my grandmother, had 9 children in Mexico, and so it was thinking about maybe what her day-to-day and what her life was like compared to mine. But I think, one of my milestones was probably, in 2016, 2017. I made about 45 prints about Casta, which is about race. And basically in, the 1800s, Casta was something that came from Spain when they went to Mexico to try to classify people and to discourage them from mixing with those that are indigenous or of African descent. So, my work actually was done here in Minnesota. I did 3 solo exhibitions, one being in Duluth at the Tweed Museum, and through that, I think I really wanted to have people have conversations about race and what it signifies, and how our country has, I don't know, we have to kind of this confront the stark legacy, right?
Yeah, yeah. With those conversations that you've had, uh, at least in the past, how how has maybe the tone of the perspective different between the indigenous communities and the non-indigenous communities that you've had with them?
It's interesting. Thought a lot about the census and how we classify ourselves, how we self-identify. And so I think it's really interesting that Latinx is actually not a race. And so we are expected to choose whether we are white or indigenous or black or Asian. And so that to me is really intriguing, like how, and so I think that Latinx community struggles with that a lot in how they would classify themselves.
Yeah, that's for even for Native Americans, Indigenous, it's a political term, right? American Indian is I think the official American term, and language is very very important, very specific on how I guess how we represent ourselves.
Yeah, so I was saying like in 2016 and 2017, I did the work on Costa, but one of the pieces was actually about La Malinche, who helped Cortez conquer Mexico. So it's always been sort of a controversial figure. And the piece I made, I think, was trying to have the discussion regarding La Malinche, who was an indigenous woman. She could speak 3 languages, which is what probably helped Cortez the Spanish conquistador, but at the same time, we were looking at it through a more contemporary lens that a woman who was sold to him really didn't have very many choices about how she would survive and move forward. So I really enjoyed thinking about how this is generational, like how many years ago this was. Well, the 1600s or beyond, and so then how do we, change those roles and reevaluate our historical knowledge?
Mm. How has the reaction varied or compared to each other between the generations, younger artists and or older audience as well?
It's interesting because I think I have so much pride in my Mexican descent. It's something I've always celebrated, but I think when I was younger, there was a lot of emphasis. Well, the generation above me was discouraged from speaking Spanish. and told that they would never assimilate if they kept their native language. And then when I grew up, then there was this, I think people started to take politically would take pride in speaking Spanish. And now, more lately, I started to wonder if it shifted to be more about the color of your skin. And so it's interesting to me how these expectations in mainstream and how you're classified is actually, I think, viewed, from others and from oneself at the same time.
Hmm. I mean, we are in a very hyper political environment right now, and so that's an interesting take. I haven't thought about in those terms because growing up on the reservation, I've, I have the perspective of natives within the United States having a very similar experience. The boarding school era, where they weren't allowed to speak their language, and they those when they became parents, they discouraged us from learning the language as well. But somewhere in there, the younger generation started speaking it through school programs and efforts. And so there's this gap between who can speak and who are more established speakers. And it's encouraging for me to see younger people speaking our languages. It gives me hope for us, even though I don't have the confidence to speak it myself.
I agree. And I also think it opens people up to understanding other cultures. I think when you have some experience with a different language, you're not as intimidated when you're in a situation where others are speaking and you're not understanding, which I think is really, um, just that alone is encouraging, right? That we're a little bit more accepting of each other, even when we're might be uncomfortable because we don't understand what's happening and such.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, Taking a step back from this, let's talk about your work. What have you been working on recently? Yeah, what have you been working on recently? What's your process been?
Oh, recently? So, right now, we grupo I mean, wait, let me see. Right now, working on a series, for Metro State University called Bestiarios. There are a lot more alebrijes being made, which are those very colorful, mythical animals and such. And we are going to have some of those in the exhibition. So then the other 4 artists decided that we would, kinda take off on that topic. And I do like to think about legends, and I've done many oral folk tales and such, because I'm a big fan of storytelling and sharing, um, traditional stories, precautionary tales, and such. So this series that I'm working on currently, Bestiarios, is actually part like the creatures are part animal and part human, and they're telling stories about current contemporary events.
Nice, nice. Uh, Is there been any sort of particularly challenging moment in your artistic journey, and how were you able to overcome that?
I think my biggest challenge is balance. Have a lot of priorities of things that I want to accomplish. I recently started to describe myself as a cultural agitator, meaning that I hope that my artwork can produce some discussions and raise awareness and kind of push some boundaries. Um, and at the same time, I like to be active. Like I said, working with students that are low income first generation and with the community, helping the Latinx artists advance. And so there is this push and pull of how to manage my time and how do I know where to invest my day. And so on a day to day basis, it can even be a struggle.
I feel that I'm independent now, and so it's turned a little chaotic sometimes. Trying to sort priorities. This next question is pretty much tied into some of your answer here, but what are some of the good habits that you've developed for yourself uh, to really to really keep moving forward in your practice? And the second part would be is what are maybe some bad habits that you had to break or step away from as well?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Mm.
So, I think that I try to accomplish, especially with the arts. And it's really hard to simply be a full-time artist. I'm not necessarily a commercial artist, so I need to find other ways to make a living. Sometimes that can be cumbersome, and it can also be really inspirational. My job, and so I think what I try really hard to do, and I give this advice especially to younger or emerging artists, is to try to accomplish something every day in your art form. So maybe you're really tired that day and you get home from your job and you lack some motivation, but you can then like maybe do something that's a little simpler, like edit your resume or review applications or even make lists so that when I do have the time and energy, I can go back to those lists and reprioritize and try to keep on track for what I want to accomplish.
That that list, offering is an amazing thing. I've started doing that myself, because there are days where I'm done, I'm taxed for the day, and I can't do anything more. But when I start the next day then or whenever I sit back down to get going, have a list of things just to help me along the way is invaluable.
Yeah, and I mean maybe it just means getting the supplies ready for when you have the time to really, go deep into what you're working on.
Yeah. So part of this series, is, we're supported by Art of the Rural, who's sponsored, a couple of these episodes, one with, Javier, Tavera, and, Joe Allen, another one of our former guests. And some of the conversations that we're having are relationships between artists and their communities, whether they're larger communities, smaller communities, rural communities. And I just wanted to ask you about if you could talk about your relationship with communities, maybe smaller communities, like which you've grown up in, and the large communities where you reside currently.
Yes. So I actually grew up in Stillwater, and so I say that as a rural area, but when I was growing up, it really was a rural area.
Mm.
Really was a place that was quieter, almost farm town ish, and I think that um, my mother's family being in Mexico and going back and forth really gave me some perspective on the difference between Mexico City and Stillwater was the urban and then the small town experience. But I really have, I think, benefited from that as well because it gives me perspectives in Minnesota on how different people are and how they've been raised in different environments and such. And so I see that as a fact of who I am and how it helps me analyze the day to day and the different cultural differences. Um, but it's really important, I think, to have exposure of different cultures in these rural areas and having the ability, um, I think, to share your cultural experiences in many different environments. So I've been fortunate to exhibit at the Plains Museum in Fargo or the Duluth Museum, the Tweed in Duluth and different areas. And now, um, currently with Serpentine Arts, which is the nonprofit organization that I work with Latinx artists, we are working on an exhibition for January at the Mankato University with
Okay.
Edson Rosas there.
Okay. Okay. Uh, that yeah, that leads right to the next question. What's on the horizon for you? What's coming up?
Well, right now, I enjoy preparing for these exhibitions that I'm working on, and I tend to choose and experiment with many different mediums. So I'm always expanding my skill set in that way. And I also have been running Serpentina Arts and helping Latinx artists advance their craft and their professional skills. So we have worked primarily in the Twin Cities, but have also reached out and are trying to collaborate with artists currently. We are working with Natalia Rocafuerte, which is she's about 3 hours down there by Winona. And so we're working to try to figure out how to do a film festival. So try to incorporate artists in the more rural areas, and that's something new. So we're trying to expand the services that way.
Okay. Okay. Well, with that last part there, I'm starting a film festival here in Fargo next spring, so maybe there's an opportunity there for us to figure something out.
That'd be great. That would be fun.
Yeah. 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 Uh, what's what have I missed in our questions here? Is there anything that you would like to share?
Um, I think I encourage people to get out to view things, to experience cultural activities if they can. I think during the pandemic, people became more and more comfortable at working from home and limiting their interaction with people. But in order to really understand each other and each other's cultures and experiences and who we are, I think it takes a little investment on each of us to maybe go to an event that we don't typically go to, support artists and their production. I mean, usually that's the most important thing is sharing what they're creating, and I think it is an incredible way for us to try to understand each other better during these times that there's so much division.
That's a great point. And so I think, yeah, so much of our divide is fueled by the separation created by social media and people just sort of siloing themselves together in these echo chambers and not being in the community and enjoying events and food and experiences together.
I agree. I agree, Joe.
Yeah. Well, where can our listener check out your work? Is there a landing place for them to connect with you and what you're doing?
I have a website which shows probably needs to be updated, but it has it's my full name. It's like www.maria Cristina with no H in Spanish and .com. And I also promote on Facebook and Instagram under
Okay.
Tina Tavera.
Tavera. Okay, we'll put links in the show notes for our listeners to connect. So, uh, well, Tina, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast and giving us an update on what's going on and the new work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it.
And that does it for this episode of Five Plain Questions. I want to thank Tina again for her time and sharing her story with us. One of the joys of this podcast is not just meeting great artists, but to be able to have a chance to check back in with them and see what they're doing currently. Her work and presence in our community is truly a gift, and I hope that we can all appreciate that. I'm so grateful for all that she's doing, and I really hope that you're able to follow and support her. So please check out her website at mariacristinatavera.com and her social media accounts on Facebook, on Instagram, and Threads. The links are in the show notes. I also want to thank you for joining us and spending your time listening to what I feel is a very important story and perspective from our community. So please, join us next time as we speak with another incredible person. I'm Joe Williams. Thank you for listening to Five Plain Questions. Your support helps keeps these conversations going. You can follow us on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, Blue Sky, and to stay connected with us, visit us at 11warriorarts.com. There you can explore past episodes, check out our exclusive merch, and sign up for our upcoming newsletter. Every listen, share, and purchase helps support this podcast. Support for this podcast comes from Art of the Rural, working to advocate rural culture and equity through collaboration, media, and the arts. Our episodes are produced and edited by Pod for Good. Jesse and the team work tirelessly to create the high-quality episodes you're listening to right now, and removing all of my ums and quirks. Well, that does it. You take care, and we'll see you next time. This has been an 11 Warrior Arts production.